Hello everyone, top 5 primaries in Warframe. With the new addition to a lot of new INCARNON weapons, we do have some primaries as well, and this is possibly the best time to make a top 5 list. Now, I will be making a top 5 INCARNON list sooner rather than later, as soon as I get all of the new INCARNON weapons, at least. I'm missing, I think, one other primary one, and I'll get that one and I'll make that video, so keep an eye out for that. But for now, in general. So, a couple of disclaimers that I want to put out of the way. First of all, number 5 is not better than number 1, number 1 is not worse than number 5, and so on and so forth. There's just 5 weapons that are extremely good at killing almost everything, if not everything in the game. Now, the Warframe of choice is Revenant. I'm using this build primarily in all of my clips. I do occasionally have this build active, but I do not use Roar, so keep that in mind for the people in the comments that are gonna look out for this and see me, you know, seeing, oh my god, there's Roar right there. This build doesn't influence any of the weapons, it doesn't influence the damage, the critical chance, anything. It's just a basic build for me to survive and test out weapons in peace. Now, I do use a Smita Kavat, so that could possibly change out some outcomes, but nonetheless, I mean, you're gonna notice when the buff is active. I do use a secondary and a melee weapon as well. I do not use them a lot in the gameplay, but some weapons, like for example the Phantasma Prime, does need a little bit of help with acolytes and, for example, some other weapons as well. So that's why I'm gonna carry a primary, or sorry, a melee weapon and a secondary. Now, keep this in mind. You can always choose a Warframe to your liking, so if a weapon is a crit-based weapon, for example, you can go and choose, let's find him if I can, Hero or even Gyre. Now, that's something that you always keep in mind. If it has a slow fire rate and you love doing a lot of damage, Gauss is an amazing option as well. So it's all up to you, it's all up to your Warframe choice, and so on and so forth. I use Revenant for testing, that is completely it. So, without any more dilly-dallying, let's get straight into the top 5 video. At number 5, we of course have the old but gold PHENMOR. Yes, with the first primary INCARNON weapon added into Warframe. It may be old by some people's standards, but nonetheless this weapon is a weapon that should be feared and that should be a must pick up for any player. This is actually one of the better weapons for Archon hunting because it does so much damage. And nonetheless, the INCARNON evolution allows it to turn in from a semi-auto rifle into a fully fledged machine gun. Basically, anything that you see in front of you is getting shredded without any issues. The other evolutions are on the screen right now, the ones that I picked, and the mods will come up soon enough as well. Of course, this weapon with its evolutions, I wouldn't really prefer to use critical chance, so that's why the mod setup looks up like this: corrosive and heat base damage, and basically a lot of destruction left, right and center. Now keep in mind that I think at one point in the video, in the gameplay, the Smita Kavat actually does buff my critical chance, but not really too big of a nuisance. This weapon, as I said, still shines bright. It is one of the best INCARNON weapons in the game at the moment and in general. As I said, a must pick up. Acolytes can be a little bit tolerant to this weapon because it is mostly focused on base damage and also, of course, status chance, which, of course, statuses with acolytes don't really mix well, but nonetheless, this weapon is incredibly good. A machine gun that allows you to basically turn on some background to do music and shred everything in front of you. But right now, we're gonna be moving on to number 4. And at number 4, we have the Paris Prime INCARNON form, and also sort of the Notaruk as well. Now, both of these weapons function on the same principle. Of course, the Notaruk has its perfect shot, and the INCARNON form of the Paris Prime has its own sort of Notaruk form, but without that perfect shot. Nonetheless, both of the weapons play really similarly. The damage is about the same, the damage output is about the same, game. I guess the only better side of the Nautilus is the actual punch through itself, because the Paris Prime inside of its INCARNON has body punch through, not actual terrain punch through, but the Nautilus does. It has infinite ammo, so on and so forth, and the Paris Prime doesn't. But nonetheless, this weapon is amazing. The Paris Prime was my first ever Prime weapon in Warframe. I loved it back then much more than the Dread, and I love it now. I'm actually extremely happy about this. Now, of course, the evolutions are right there. You can choose and pick whichever one you want. I personally picked this one. I actually basically explained everything in my latest video on the Paris Prime as well, so if you want, you can go check that out after watching this top 5. And then the modding is pretty much plain and simple. Critical damage, critical chance, and we do have split flight instead of a galvanized chamber because of the statistics, and of course, stats-wise, split flight is much better. Nonetheless, one of the best INCARNON adapters added into Warframe recently, one of the better INCARNON weapons in the game, and nonetheless it really does rejuvenate this old and really retired weapon and brings it out of retirement, making it extremely good, on par with the Nautilus. And moving on to number 3. At number 3, we have Revenant's signature shotgun, quote unquote. It is, of course, the Phantasma Prime, or the Phantasma. It really depends on which one you want to choose. Both are great options. Nonetheless, this shotgun weapon is extremely good for killing trash units. Up to Eximus units, it doesn't matter really which level, you're going to be shredding through them anyway. We, of course, are going to have a little bit of issues killing acolytes, but that's why we have our Spore Laser Kit Gun in our secondary slot, and of course, I think it is the Paradox as my melee weapon of choice, and so that we balance things out. Now, you have to keep in mind acolytes can have only 4 status effects applied to them, and this weapon doesn't have any CC or CD, or basically critical chance or critical damage if you really want to know, and also hunter munitions cannot be used on this weapon, making it not the best weapon and not the most viable weapon against acolytes. But nonetheless, as I said, we always use a secondary and a melee weapon as well. So the build looks like this. We are using corrosive heat and just base damage mods to basically try to maximize the best sides of this weapon. As I said, trash units are not really an issue. Your left click is gonna get really used up from this, so keep that in mind. I guess if you really are treasuring that left click, this is basically the Ignis Wraith, but much better and much more scalable, I guess would be the word. But I honestly think that this is one of the best, I guess, non-critical weapons in the game. Really, I guess, no-brain weapon to use, because all you do is hold down your left click and the enemies just melt away in front of you. But nonetheless, that was our third weapon, the Phantasma. Moving on to number 2. At number 2, we have my current favorite primary weapon in the game, and I think one of the most OP weapons, I guess, added quote-unquote in Warframe. It is the LATRON Prime, or Wraith, or whichever one you choose, of INCARNON adapter. This weapon is incredibly good, and when I say incredibly good, basically from a single shot rifle it turns into an auto cannon that destroys everything, that fires bouncing projectiles that bounce up to 3 or 4 times. There's gonna be a number on the screen, I'm correcting me because I cannot remember at the moment, but nonetheless, this weapon, combined with its amazing evolutions, which are right there, especially the 4th one, is incredibly good. The INCARNON mode seems to run out so fast on this weapon, but honestly, so do the enemies in front of you. I'm actually so excited to talk about this weapon because this is one of, if not the most, I guess you could call it OP/broken/extremely good weapons in Warframe. I love this weapon. This weapon, I haven't really used anything like this ever since the Kuva Brahma sits its olden days. It doesn't run out of ammo. With its INCARNON mode, which you charge up incredibly fast, you can clear out rooms, acolytes, Thrax units, anything basically that you can think of. This weapon can definitely clear it out. Amazing critical chance and critical damage, amazing status chance as well. It depends, of course, on which weapon you choose to put the INCARNON mode on. I, for example, chose the Wraith, but most people did choose the Prime variant. But nonetheless, the evolutions are amazing. The mods are like this, which I forgot to show, so there you go, you can check out the mods there. Pretty plain and simple build, nothing too extremely, amazing, but believe me, the weapon itself definitely is. So, the LATRON Prime or Wraith, INCARNON, Adapter, Weapon, whatever you want to call it, is one of the best weapons, bar none, inside of Warframe, considering primary wise. But let's move on to, of course, the honorable mentions. In the honorable mentions, we have a decent sum of weapons, so let's quickly breeze through them. I have already mentioned the Notaruk when I mentioned the Paris, so that is already covered. The Plasmor are an amazing shotgun with wide coverage, especially good for the index. We also have the Cedo. The Cedo basically has built-in condition overload and also an incredibly good elemental weapon for priming, of course, for your melee weapons. Then we have the Felorx, an incredible shotgun, an INCARNON shotgun as well, with 2 modes, making this a shotgun and also a dual wielding pistol, basically turning into Reaper when inside of Overwatch. Then we have the Bubonico, an extremely good AoE and shotgun weapon as well, and the Trumna, nice weapon, primary fire, decent coverage, not as wide as the Plasmor, but the all fire basically destroys, if not one-shots acolytes. Then of course some other weapons, Kuva Brahma, pretty plain and simple, we all know this weapon. We have the Kuvazar, again, pretty notable weapon, nothing really to worry about here. And then we do have the Ignis Wraith, which is okay, but not one of the best weapons for high-end gameplay. And for those hipsters that still like using it, the Tenant Envoy. And that is basically it, and let's move on to number 1. And at number 1, we have, of course, one of the CERNOS variants, and we all know which ones it's gonna be. It's gonna be the Proboscis CERNOS. This is another bow on the list, actually the second one on the list, and this bow, you may be saying, is not definitely the best weapon in the game. Well, no, it's not. I just placed it in number 1 because number 1 is not better than number 4, so I got you there. Now, this weapon has pretty bad critical chance and multiplier stats. It has 7 rounds as well, or arrows I guess, which makes it not the best in the world. But the great feature about this weapon is, first of all, it is primarily slash, it does have viral, you can mod it for even more viral, but I haven't, I modded it like this, so there you go, and now you can look at that. It is of course more corrosive, so basically what we have is corrosive, viral, and heat on our weapon. Now, amalgam serration would be a little bit better, but I sadly do not have it, but if you can get it, definitely get it. This weapon's special feature is when you fire an arrow, hit an enemy or the ground, it just drags in enemies, and then it explodes, dealing loads and loads of damage. This weapon is, again, sort of with the Phantasm. It's not the best weapon against acolytes because, of course, status effects, less slash because Hunter Munitions doesn't exist here. It does apply slash and has a chance to apply slash on impact, but if you don't hit them, then it's not really that useful. Nonetheless, against trash units, basically all you need to do, press left click, release it, press left click, release it, so on and so forth, and rinse and repeat. Everything gets dragged in, it gets damaged, it basically dies, and then that is it. This weapon is extremely good at clearing out rooms, sort of the same as with many of the other weapons in this video, but as I said, the only weakness to this weapon is the actual acolytes themselves. But nonetheless, that was my top 5 list for June of 2023. There could be new weapons arriving that might change the list or even end up on the next one. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys did, do leave a like, comment down below what weapons would you put instead of honorable mentions inside of the actual list itself, and of course keep in mind top 5 is just 5 weapons that are extremely good. And do subscribe for more content. This has been your lovely host, the Gaming Weasel, and I will see you guys on the next one.